because, welcome back. I'm back with another video, talking about and exploring the thoughts of my mind and why I think things the way I think things, I guess, if that makes sense. Because in simple terms, just like, I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of thoughts, but in the sense of like, who am I? Why am I here? I've always had this thought process of, not even thought process, I've always had this thought of like, wanting to ask somebody like, who are they? And actually having like a legitimate conversation on who they think they are and whether or not they're actually satisfied with where they are in life. Because I always question like, even if I do everything that I do, right? Can you really classify that as like a fulfilled life? What do you classify as a fulfilled life? Does a fulfilled life mean you have to have like a ton of money or something like that, right? Or do you have to have like, are you like, what is rich defined by? I see videos online where they say they classify rich as, having like a house, a car, and having a, stable family, a stable household, and they classify that as rich. While some other people classify rich as being, you have millions of dollars, right? And, you just have endless money, you have a constant source of income, you're always making profit, right? There's always an increase of money every week as opposed to like, oh, there's like sometimes you break even or sometimes you go under. And it always makes me question, like, why is that, right? Why does it even matter, to be honest? Like, in terms of rich, isn't rich based off the comparison of your assets and net worth compared to somebody else who also has assets and net worth, right? Isn't your classification of rich based off another person? It makes me question, like, why do we always compare ourselves to somebody else, which is, often confusing. Because even earlier in life, right, when I was in like, I think middle school or high school, people would compare themselves to somebody else. Like, they compare themselves to each other or say they have like better shoes. It's like they have better shoes than somebody else. And it's like, even from a younger age, we instinctively compare ourselves to somebody else. Like we have to be better than somebody for whatever reason. Like we can't just, know each other, I guess. Um, we can't just be on the same level. Or even then, we can't just be like, it's kind of like if we were like on a highway, right? And the cars were constantly cutting each other, trying to get in front of each other or trying to be, further ahead of each other, rather than staying in their own lane and keeping a consistent speed limit, which, in my opinion, makes sense. Would basically mean like everybody's perfectly fine with their own lifestyle, right? And perfectly fine with their own life. And I feel like it's like you can think about it from the perspective as like, oh, then life would be boring because then everybody would be, equal. But then, isn't that like, in a sense, wouldn't that in theory be peaceful? Because then it brings the question of like, would peace be boring, or would you just be satisfied with where you're at? But then this also brings up the question like maybe the reason why things are never really peaceful because people don't enjoy being in a relaxed environment. People constantly want to be better. They constantly want to one up somebody else, right? Which leads to the situation where it's artificially created, where people have bad environments, right? Or they go out of their way to achieve their own success by screwing somebody else over. And it feels like a lot of people don't see that, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of situations in life, whether it be like from the base level of like high school where somebody will cheat off somebody else to get a higher score, right? Or somebody will in general cheat just to get further ahead in life, right? Or it'll be like somebody will do a job, like an instance of like, for example, like a job, right? Somebody will do half the amount of work as someone and then get the same amount of credit, which is basically like you're taking advantage of that person while putting forth half the amount of effort. And I'd say it's kind of dumb because it's like you could use the argument like it makes sense because it's like why not take the easier route? Like if it's easier, why wouldn't you do it, right? But then I just feel like that comes down to sadly, a perspective of character. Like it just makes you a garbage person, which most people don't care if they're garbage people. A lot of people just don't have, I guess, you could call it integrity, but I'd say just they don't have self-respect. They don't care how people view them. Either that, or they only care how specific people view them. They don't care they don't care if, like, Jimmy, who's like a janitor, right? They don't care what Jimmy thinks because he's a janitor, but they'll care what Brian, who's like the CEO of a giant company, right? What he thinks because he might hire them or something like that, right? They might get some extra benefit, right? But it's like, does it make sense to do that? No, I would say no because at the end of the day, everybody matters really, and that's what I don't understand. People always say that everybody matters, but then they paint pictures and paint perspectives of like as if not everybody matters, or they'll create a scenario where people are separated, and in the sense of like they'll differentiate themselves. They'll not differentiate. They'll isolate. They'll take a certain instance in a certain example of like something bad happening in history, and they'll do everything in their power to create an example or use something that's tied to them and tied to their name to separate themselves or disassociate themselves from whatever incident that is. Like, for example, like someone could be like, I don't know, there could be like for example, like I saw like I saw this clip on Instagram, right? It was a clip of like, some kid shooting up a school, right? And they disassociated themselves by saying that person wasn't like them, which didn't make sense, right? Because evidently, guess what? In just about every way, shape, and form, we're all similar. The baseline is like we're all human. The second line is, kind of like we go down. It's kind of like a classic. It's kind of like a tree, or you could say like a skill tree, for example, right? Like people will go out of their way to separate themselves. Like you could say it'll be species, then it'll go down to like area of origin, then race, then culture, like how they act within that race, right? Then it'll go down to age. Then it'll go down to, I would say, whatever it goes down to. I can't really think of it right now, but it's like people instinctively go out of their way to separate themselves and disassociate themselves from somebody else, even though at the end of the day we're essentially all the same. I'd say the only difference is we have different ideals, ambitions, and goals, which is like another thing. Is like a lot of people have goals and ambitions, but like there will be someone that says that they hate people who lack ambition. I would not say that anybody lacks ambition. Realistically speaking, everybody has ambition. People just have, I guess, less motivation to achieve and seek out that ambition because maybe they see life from a certain perspective as like it's not really worth it to try to go out of their way to achieve that ambition. Because even if you go out of your way to achieve that ambition, then what? And even if it's not, then what? If the whole world's stacked against you, trying to prevent you from achieving what you want to achieve, naturally, people are gonna have like people who like think too much, right? They'll psych themselves out of assuming, like they'll automatically assume that they're not going to succeed. And one thing I'd say I learned in life up to this point is like you can do whatever you want to do, right? You can do whatever you want in life and still succeed with it. It's just a matter of realistically how badly do you want to achieve it. And I say that because it's like it's a lot easier said than done. Naturally, as all things are in life, a lot of things are easier said than done. Which is a lot of thing. It was just a lot. It's like the main thing people fail to understand. A lot of things are easier said than done. Like you could say, "Oh, I want to basically," uh, I'd say I want to change the way people think, right? I want to change the world. I want to do this. I want to do that, right? But if you don't actually put forth the effort of wanting to do that, right? If you don't start from the base level, right, of trying to fix that solution and fixing that problem, or at least using your most powerful weapon in your arsenal, which is literally your voice, right? Talking is probably the most powerful thing someone can do, right? Because you initiate an idea and a thought process in somebody else from simply them hearing your words. The initial seed of placing thought into somebody else's head and mind automatically just completely changes the way that they view the world, right? It's kind of like in TV shows, in like a investigation thing or a crime thing, where they're trying to, like, I don't know, hide their identity, or they're trying to do this or they're trying to do that, right? Anything from like a strategical perspective, they try to talk about how they place like a seed of doubt inside somebody else's head, right, or somebody else's mind, right? Like how they plant this thought that maybe actually, like, maybe like, because originally they'll be like so certain that this person did this, right? But they'll plant the seed of doubt in their head, and like maybe actually, like maybe this didn't happen. Maybe this person didn't do that, right? They'll do that, right? And it'll lead to a whole different area of circumstance. It's like it creates a situation where the probability of said person being caught or said person being exposed decreases. And it's kind of like in life, it's basically like the textbook definition of like why the voice is so powerful, because it paints a picture of like all you have to do is essentially talk. You don't even have to speak the truth. That's the crazy part, especially with the internet. You don't even have to speak the truth, and you can influence someone, whether it be directly or indirectly, having a without even having the intention to influence someone. You can influence someone, and a lot of people don't understand that. And a lot of people fail to underestimate how strong their opinion actually is, because they view like, oh, I'm not some celebrity, I'm not some streamer, I'm not some big YouTuber, I'm not some this, that, third, right? It's irrelevant, because whether you believe it or not, the voice you put out there or put out to the world has an influence on someone. And that's just, I guess, my opinion. But I'm like, video's going on for too long, so I'll just end it here. But, it's a nice conversation to myself, I guess. But like, if anybody wants to give any ideas on what I should realistically converse about, I guess, or talk about, right, or paint a picture of, and or verbally, I guess, create a Venn diagram of, just leave a comment, right? And then, I'll talk about it, because I like talking about things. I like having conversations with people and expanding, I guess, my own depth of knowledge while expanding somebody else's depth of knowledge, because that's typically what conversation leads to. And that's why you just have to talk to people, in a sense, because whether directly or indirectly, it makes you smarter. In some sense. I wouldn't really classify intelligence. I don't really classify someone as smart or not, or intelligent or not, because you can always become smarter. You can always become more intelligent, right? So I never really classify someone as intelligent. You're just experienced on a certain subject and or topic, which, yeah. But anyway, see you guys in the next video.